Hello everyone. In today's episode, we'll be replacing the sticky starter on my E36. I will be replacing the starter from the top as I have to replace all the coolant pipes because the car leaks coolant a bit. This means I have to remove the intake manifold, wiring and fuel rail to gain access to the water pipes. I would also like to show some used parts I found. A hood opening wire, front seat belts, which hopefully will work better than the current belts, a switch panel to replace the current broken panel, a light switch panel, which has a switch for fog lights. I'm planning on fitting OEM fog lights to the car, so an OEM switch is always a nice feature. A gear knob. Oh, and here are the fog lights I bought. And here you can see the panel. There is an added switch, which I want to get rid of as soon as possible. I also noticed that this light switch is a bit loosey-goosey.
The rear of the car was getting all loosey-goosey in the last sector there.
And the new switch is much tighter. Since we're dealing with electric parts here, the first thing to do is disconnecting the battery terminal. As you can see here, the starter is in a tight place. I can't really even see the bolts that are holding the starter. They can probably be removed from under the car. I guess this could be a little easier on right-hand drive models since there is a bit more space in those models. I've heard that you can wiggle the starter without removing all of these parts, and even the BMW service manual shows that the starter should come off without removing anything else. Now, as seen from under the car, there isn't much room here either. But I think that the bolts can be removed. That doesn't change the fact that I still have to remove the intake and other parts too. Off comes the upper manifold. That wasn't too bad. While I was wiggling out the lower manifold, this happened. The coolant pipe cracked. So about time to replace the pipes. Maybe this starter wiring needs an upgrade too. I will get rid of the wiring, but the wires are all the same color, so I must mark them so I know which goes where. Oh, and the fuel pipes have to be disconnected before removing the lower manifold. So there is the starter. I'm going to disconnect the wires and then try to unscrew the two bolts holding it. But before that, I will remove the coolant pipe so that I won't spill any coolant into the bell housing. So these should be in one piece. I wonder if this is the original part. Someone has put an Allen bolt to hold the starter. The other one is a regular bolt. I spare you from the unscrewing. I decided to try if the starter can be dropped downwards, since it should come off that way. Well, it did. Now you know. In goes the new starter. I found Torx bolts to replace the mismatched bolts. I also sped up this footage because for some reason, I used a ratchet instead of an impact gun to screw the bolts in. Okay, time for new coolant pipes. This is an easy thing to do now that everything has been removed from around it. This one goes to the back of the engine. I lubricate the O-ring to ease the installation. Okay, now is the time for new wiring for the starter. I don't know what happened here and why there are so many connections in the wires, and immediately I noticed that I have made a mistake. When I disconnected the wires, I also disconnected them from the starter end. Now I don't know which wire goes to which starter connector. Here I'm making a wiring set for the starter. This includes a connector to replace the current screw connector and connectors for the starter terminals. I wanted to get rid of the screw-type connector because they don't really belong to cars and it's not a quick way to disconnect wires, and you always have to track the wires back as you disconnect them. This wiring turned out fine. It's not OEM, but I like it. Good thing I record almost everything. From the video I can see which wire goes to which terminal. It's a bit blurry, but I think I'm able to figure it out. Now what's left to do is remove the old connector and crimp new terminals for the wires, and it's done. One wire done. Now let's do the other two. There was one more screw connector, which I removed. I replaced it with quick connect terminals. I should probably clear all this dirt from the blower housing. The intake needs a little cleaning before it can be reinstalled. Also, this gasket surface needs cleaning. There is a lot of dirt built up. Installed a new hose for the fuel line because why not? Okay, time to put everything back to their places. Here I'm testing the fuel lines. By switching the ignition on and off repeatedly, I'm making pressure to the fuel rail. This should show if there are any leaks in the rail or the fuel lines. Moment of truth. Time to start the car. And nothing happens. That's weird. I don't get it. Everything should be in their places. I pulled the relays to see if they are not connecting properly. I was also thinking that maybe the ignition switch bypass has something to do with this, but the starter should be exactly the same type as the old one. Am I missing something obvious here? I will check if I made a mistake with the wiring. I took the old starter to test which terminal is for which purpose. This is very safe, by the way. Yeah, my wiring was not connected to the right terminals after all. I swapped their terminals, and now the car starts. Now just put everything back together, and we should be good to go. The car has a rough idle when the engine is cold, but that has been a problem before this. But at least the car works now. The battery light is lit on the dash, however the battery is charging. I'm guessing 2 wires are still misplaced. Time to redo all that again. Okay, the battery light is gone now. Finally. That was a huge amount of work to replace a few small parts, and my stupidity made me repeat some steps over and over. But at least there is some progress with the car now. Next thing on the list is the hood opening wire. This thing really bugs me, and I want to finally get rid of it and replace it with a working wire. This one is used but seems to be working just fine. Next, I have to connect the wire to the other hood lock and bolt the locks back into their places. The pin of the old wire is still in its hole. Let's see if I can dig it out. Okay, I'm gonna need your help now. I will pull the hood opening handle and you will check if you see any movement in the locks, okay? Well, did they work? I hope they did, because I will shut the hood now, and I don't know how we will open the hood if the other lock doesn't work. Well, they work like a charm. Thanks for your help. So the last thing I'm doing today is refilling and bleeding the coolant system. I drained most of the coolant when I replaced the coolant pipes, so the system needs a refill now. This car is one of the easiest cars when it comes to bleeding the coolant system. I'll show you how. So the coolant system has air in it, and we have to get rid of it. First, you start the car and let it run. Add coolant to the expansion tank as much as you can so that the tank is full. Then you can remove the bleed screw on top of the tank. You should see some bubbles with coolant coming out of the bleeding hole. Let the car run and reach the operating temperature. To help bleed out all of the air, you can squeeze the radiator hoses while the car is running. This helps the air to move upwards in the system. Remember to turn your heater to the hottest setting. This will remove the air bubbles from the heater core too. You may have to add some coolant while the car is running because when the air comes out, your coolant will replace that space. Add until the coolant level is on max. It's usually placed to the side of the expansion tank. Depends on the car. Once the coolant stays on its level and you don't see any bubbles anymore, you can go ahead and screw back the bleeding screw and radiator cap. If your heater blows warm air, you are good to go. And that's all for today, guys. We made some small progress with the car again, but there is still a lot to do. As you noticed, I did not change the thermostat or the water pump, but they will be replaced in the next episode, as there is an oil leak in the front of the engine too. But that's nothing new, so they will be replaced when I'm fixing the oil leak. Hopefully, you found this video helpful, and I hope you learned something today. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.